Shalom. This week we are reading Parashat Emor, beginning in Sefer Vayikra, book of Leviticus, chapter 22. And Parashat Emor is very tight, I think, very concise, very succinct. There's only a few themes, but I think that the Parsha carries with it one of the most extraordinarily beautiful messages in the whole Torah. It's expressed in a very clear and straightforward manner. Parashat Emor is coming on the heels of Parashat Kedoshim, and Parashat Kedoshim, as we know, deals with the laws of holiness for the whole people of Israel. Parashat Kedoshim, last week's Torah portion, began with the exhortation. Moshe gathered together the entire nation and stated to them, "You shall be holy, for I, Hashem, am holy." And indeed, the Parsha also ends with the words, "You shall be holy for me, for I, Hashem, am holy, and I have separated you from the peoples to be mine." And the truth is that the laws of Parashat Kedoshim that we read about last week are all laws of separation, because really this whole calling to be holy is really about being different. It's about being separate. All the laws of the Torah have a way of separating the Jewish people from the rest of the world. And God tells us emphatically, "You shall be like me." And just as I am not comparable to anything else in the world, totally separate, totally different, so too you, my people, are going to be totally separate, totally different from anything else that's going on earth. And the way to go about that, Hashem says, is through following these laws. So here we see already that holiness isn't about necessarily some sort of mystical experience, something otherworldly. It's actually a concept of very much being involved in this world, but in a different way, to be something else altogether than other people. This apparently, according to this principle of Parashat Kedoshim, is the calling for the Jewish people. But the reaction of many people regarding the laws of the Torah, the aspect of all of the prohibitions or the positive commandments even that apply to Israel, they're like, these things are, these laws, these things are so legalistic and they don't apply no more. Or people say, they've been done away with. Some people say that. And people say, this can't be the way to get to God, by having to live all these laws. But the truth is, people who express themselves this way really don't know the first thing about God or the possibility of having a real relationship with Him, because having a real relationship with God is about accepting responsibility for ourselves, for our actions, for our own space. And that takes a lot of real spiritual maturity to be able to muster that kind of self-discipline to live a separate life. So it's really not about getting involved in all sorts of legalistic, things that hold us back from some sort of spiritual experience. It's about having a spiritual experience by the dedication that it takes to live a certain kind of life, and that in itself is really a godly endeavor. And again, what these laws of holiness are all about, it's clear that God is telling us, as He told us at the end of last week's Parsha, "You shall be holy to me, for I, Hashem, am holy, and I have separated you from the peoples to be mine." So the idea is that these laws of holiness are really about being separate from everyone else. We're not supposed to be doing what everyone else is doing. We're not supposed to be acting like everyone else. We're here for a totally different purpose. And now we come to this week's Torah portion, Parashat Emor. And we have what would seem to be an obvious connection between last week's Torah portion, which was about the people altogether, laws of holiness that apply to the entire Jewish people, because this week's Torah portion begins in chapter 22 with laws of holiness for the kohanim. Special laws that separate the kohanim, the descendants of Aaron who are serving in the Holy Temple, separate them from the rest of the people of Israel. And also, this chapter involves a number of things that apply only to the kohanim, or that the kohanim would be dealing with, such as the animals that are going to be brought in the Holy Temple. So just as we had in Parashat Kedoshim these laws of holiness that are essentially boundaries and certain kind of a prescription for the people of Israel to be separate, so too within the people of Israel there is the body of the kohanim, and essentially the message here is also understood that what Israel is to the world, the kohanim are to Israel. What Israel accomplishes in the world, the kohanim accomplish within Israel. Totally separate, totally different from everybody else, totally different rules that everybody else has to follow. But what we get from both things, the idea of Israel and in the world and the kohanim within Israel, is that there is a calling, very specific, very personal, which is a spin on reality, the true reality. It's a vision, it's a program that we are being enjoined, Israelites and Kohen alike, a program to set oneself apart. And of course, this is a goal. This is a life's goal. This is a purpose. This is a program wherein every moment of life is connected to this divine vision of a purpose-driven life. And no, it's not the same thing for everybody else or for anybody else. It's a totally different walk of trying to emulate God's separation, how He is so different and incomparable to anything else, by ourselves being different and incomparable and clinging to a very specific program which is designed to bring this purpose, which we could really totally revolutionize the idea of spirituality and the purpose of creation and holiness by saying it's all about bringing a level of purpose into life. That's what it really means to be spiritual. That's what it really means to be holy anyway, to be committed to a particular program. And essentially what God is telling Israel, and what God is telling the Kohanim within Israel, is that if you want to be connected to me and bring that into the world, which is your basic task, then you're not going to be connected to the world in the same manner as everybody else. Not that you're not going to be in this world. That's a big mistake that some people make. Just as some people think that the whole legalistic, again, they say that in a very derogatory way, legalistic application of the Torah, or having to keep these laws, they say that that can't be godly and it can't be a true connection. So too, in the other extreme, some people say that you can't be in this world at all and yet be godly. And the Torah has a very particular path of being very much rooted in this world, very much a part of this world, very participatory, and very much totally taken up with the fact that we are physical beings in a physical world, but yet our connection is not the same as that of everyone else. And it's so confusing, and life can be very confusing. There's so much going on, there's so many different possibilities, and there's so many different ideas of how a person should act and how a person should behave. And essentially what God is saying through the commandments of holiness, the commandments of separation of Parshat Kedoshim, and now again in a more finely tuned version for the Kohanim in Parashat Emor, he's saying, you know what? Get a grip on yourself. This is how it goes. This is how you have to do it. Just don't pay any attention to everything else. But if you want this to work, my idea, my program, God says, of your representing me in this world and accomplishing something for the sake of creation, get a grip, because it doesn't go like it goes for everyone else. You have to do it completely different. So this seems to be a logical connection and a beautiful segue from the laws of holiness for the people of Israel to the laws of holiness to the cream, as it were, of the people of Israel, the Kohanim. But when I say that there's something very extraordinary about this parsha that's being expressed altogether, I don't just mean this first chapter, 22, which again deals exclusively with the laws of holiness, i.e. the laws of separation for the Kohanim, and that which applies only to the Kohanim. What about the rest of the Torah portion? The rest of the Torah portion also very, very specific. Chapter 22, again, these laws of the Kohanim. Chapter 23, Shabbat and the festivals. And it is the Torah reading for many of the festivals throughout the year. Parashat Emor, chapter 23, is the whole cycle of what we like to call the sacred seasons of Hashem, beginning with Shabbat, the proclamation of all the festivals, the appointed festivals of Hashem, the holy convocations, which you shall designate in their appropriate time. And we go through this whole beautiful, life-changing cycle of Passover and the 7 weeks of the Omer, which we're currently in right now, that really form a bridge between Passover and Shavuot. And, of course, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, this beautiful vision of time being sanctified. Okay, and then chapter 24, essentially 3 ideas. The menorah in the Holy Temple, which is to constantly illuminate from within the temple. The commandment of the table of the showbread, the 12 loaves of specially baked bread are on display constantly before the divine presence in the Holy Temple. That was first given now in the desert and first fulfilled under the harsh desert conditions with a wandering Mishkan, the tabernacle. And then the Parsha ends with the mysterious blasphemer, someone who actually pronounced the name of Hashem and blasphemed. And the Torah doesn't specifically tell us what he said. And then, of course, this had never happened before. And so it was necessary to clarify what his punishment should be, what should be done with him. And that's what's taken up for the rest of the parasha. So we have this incredible kind of process, I think, going on here in Parashat Emor, where we began with these laws of the kohanim, laws of distinction, laws of separation. Again, a direct continuation of the laws of Kedusha, of sanctity, of holiness for the whole nation. Then we have this proclamation of the cycle of time, sanctifying time, designating the seasons of Hashem in their appointed times. And then we end with the menorah, the light of the divine presence, as it were, emanating from the Holy Temple, the table of the showbread, and this miscreant, this blasphemer. I believe that there's a very unique thread here that connects between all of these topics, and that this one parsha, which is like the heart of the book of Leviticus, which is in itself like the heart of the whole Torah, that this idea expresses to us practically the entire program of life as it should be lived. There's an idea here, a challenge, that we are essentially challenged to rise to, and that is this getting a grip, sanctifying life and space and time, and keeping it going and bringing this light into our lives. You see, because again, we start with the laws of holiness that are designed to uplift every aspect of our lives while we're in this world, but connect it to divine purpose through our separation, our emulating Hashem, our following a different drummer, our connection to reality as God tells us it should be, not like other people are doing it. That's on the level of life. That's on the level of the aspect of the spark of life within the human being. How we have to live our lives differently. But then there's also the dimension of time, because there's time and there's space and there's life. And then how do we translate that holiness? How do we keep that going throughout all the vicissitudes of time that have such a awesome effect on a human being? The ravages of time, this constant challenge of being refreshed, of not falling into complacency, of, yes, living a life of connection a certain way, and it might be really calling us to very high purpose, but we're only people. And it goes in, and it goes out, and it just keeps on rolling over us, this cycle of time. But then we have this vision of how time itself is a vehicle, an element of holiness. These are the appointed days of Hashem. They themselves, as the verse says, call out holiness. So we bring that same force of living that life, of getting a grip on ourselves, of separation, of living on the edge. We bring it into the vehicle of time, and time itself becomes holy, and we keep it going that way, so that our time that we spend on this earth becomes itself a reflection of this imprint, this stamp of a holy life, of a different kind of life, of a separate life, of a life where every single moment for the Israelites, for the kohanim amongst them, is totally connected to this consciousness, this purposeful life, this awareness of the importance of every single moment. And where, of course, is that best played out? Where is that best realized? Where is that best communicated? Where is it best felt? In the Holy Temple. The sanctification of space. And when we are living according to Hashem's instructions to us, a rarefied, separate life in this world, totally part of it, totally rooted in it, but different and totally separate. And then we are aware of the nuances of time, and we don't allow time to just wash over us. So we don't allow ourselves to become buffeted about and victimized. We don't allow ourselves to feel vulnerable by the passage of time. Oh, we're getting older. Oh, what's different about today than yesterday? No, every moment is different. Every moment in the sacred cycle of Hashem's seasons presents its own theme, its own challenge, its own special opportunity for spiritual growth. And of course, those festivals are best understood and felt and communicated and experienced in the Holy Temple. And then we become ourselves the embodiments of the concept of the menorah and the showbread, the light of the menorah representing the light of the divine presence, and the showbread on the table representing the blessing of God in this world. We ourselves become like this living proof that this can be done, that life can be sanctified, that every day doesn't have to feel like the day before, that every moment isn't like the moment before, and that what we are doing here is different, totally separate, and totally not the same thing as what everyone else is doing. And so the menorah, the light of the menorah, and the bread on the table become both the end result of this kind of sacred life, because they are themselves that light shining, and that holy showbread with the miracles associated with it. They become the living proof that God really is in the world and that it's really happening. We're really doing it. So they themselves become the living proof of the result, as well as on the symbolic level of what it is that we are trying to achieve here. But then comes along that voice that we hear from time to time. We still hear it today. Someone who comes along and says, "You're wasting your time." We have this incredible tradition, it's even mentioned here, of a great sage. His name was Rabbi Barachia, who taught that what was it that the blasphemer was saying? He was the son of the Israelite woman. He was going around the camp. Remember, this had never been tried before, the commandment of the showbread. It was first received now in the desert. Under those conditions, have this bread hot on display all week long in the tabernacle. So he was going around scoffing about the showbread, and he was saying, a king, a real king, eats warm, freshly baked bread. Why should God have cold, old bread in the tabernacle? And then another Israelite rebuffed him, and they got into blows, and the son of the Israelite woman uttered that curse. But essentially the curse was against Hashem, and it was in relation to the showbread, like he didn't really believe that it could happen, that we could make such a bread, that it would be hot all week. No, I don't think that's what it was that he was saying. I think he was saying, God isn't interested in that bread. And this is something that we hear all the time, whether it's from within Israel, from within ourselves, within each one of us, that little voice, or outsiders who say, there's nobody listening and there's nobody home and there's no points. And this is this force that we're up against in the world. That's the real blasphemy. The real blasphemy against Hashem is that voice, a person who could say, you're wasting your time, he's not listening, he's not interested, there's nobody there. Why are you thinking that you could sanctify this world? Why are you thinking that God would be interested in anything that you do? Don't you know every moment is exactly the same? Just goes in from one to the other, it just flows in, and it's just all the same. There's no point. It's all the same. There is no separation. There is no holiness. There is no purpose to try to have a purposeful, driven life, because you don't have to get a grip. It doesn't matter. You don't have to take responsibility. There's nobody around, and it's all the same. And nothing could actually be sanctified. That bread is not going to stay hot all week, and he's not home. And that's the greatest blasphemy of all. And the whole message of these parshiot, the very heart of the book of Vayikra, is that every moment is different. Every person is different. Every calling is totally different, that God is really waiting for us to respond, to get a grip, to live a life of purpose, and to bring all of this into the world, to prove to the whole world the bread is hot. And we're walking this walk, not because we're so obsessed with legalistic things, not because we feel that we have to act a certain way or we'll get zapped, but because we are emulating God. There is something different going on here. There is a separation. There's nothing we can do about that. There really is a separation. But when we live like that, when we respond to that call, the Israelites, the kohanim, when we become the light, and when we can show that that is a reality, that light shining forth from the Holy Temple, that bread baked a week ago in the Holy Temple that's still warm because God is showing an interest in our lives, that is the purpose of life. You shall be holy, for I, Hashem, your God, am holy.